It won't surprise me at all if we have technical difficulties. There we go. Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? All right. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown into the sea, which collects fish of every kind. When it is full, they haul it ashore and sit down to put what is good into buckets. What is bad, they throw away. Thus it will be at the end of the age. The angels will go out and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth. I highlighted 3 phrases in this parable. Oh, excuse me, I was speaking fine until I got in front of you. I highlighted 3 phrases in this parable that I want us to really look at kind of separately as we unpack this a little bit this morning. And again, the kingdom of heaven. So remember, we're seeing that word again, as Jesus is speaking these parables. Jesus refers to the kingdom of heaven 31 times in the New Testament. And this is actually an interesting thing. I mean, if you're interested in such, it occurs to me also that if you look at this from kind of the standpoint of what we might call sacred or mystical numerology, do y'all know what that means? Sacred numerology. It is a completion, because this is actually the 7th parable. The 7th parable that Jesus tells in the Gospel of Matthew. And this is the way that Matthew chose to order them. Okay, Matthew put them in this order. We might assume that because Matthew is so detail-oriented, we might assume that he took great care to put them in the order that Jesus actually spoke them. Yeah, because for instance, some of them that appear in the Gospel of Luke are not necessarily in this order, but Luke is getting the information secondhand. He's borrowing from other sources. Matthew heard this with his own ears. And so I like to think that Matthew recorded them in exactly the order in which Jesus spoke them. And if that is the truth, then this is the 7th one. Now, why is that important? Why is that important? How many of y'all watched The Chosen? Okay, so this is not going to be foreign to you then, right? When I do this, hopefully. There's Jesus. The 7th parable, if you look at them in their order in Matthew, it is this. It is the parable of the sower. Remember, that's where we began. The parable of the weeds or the tares. The parable of the mustard seed. The parable of the leaven. The parable of the hidden treasure in the field, which we kind of skipped. We skipped that one because we folded into the parable of the pearl of great price. And now we are at the parable of the net. So therefore, if you think about, like, as I said, sacred numerology, which I do believe, 7 is the number of completion. And so there's no disharmony here. There's no accidents. There's no coincidence in the way that Jesus teaches. So this is the 7th one. This is the completion, really. It should be. We think about it that way. The order, as I said, was chosen by St. Matthew, but 7 being the number of perfection or the number of completion. We can perceive in this parable, therefore, I think, not just a mere repetition, because you're going to hear you probably already read this, some similar themes that we heard in the parable of the tares and the wheat, right? There's a separation that's going on, yes? There's a separation that's going on, but it's not just a mere repetition, but it's the perfect conclusion, and I hope that we'll get to that today. Hopefully, I'll make that point. Maybe we can appreciate that separation, that completion, that finality in a way that we didn't fully with the parable of the tares and the wheat. Now, if you've already been to Mass, if you already looked at the readings today, I could not have chosen a better day to do this parable, to unpack this parable. Because one of the things that I want to sort of conclude with, you'll see the last thing I've highlighted there, thus it will be at the end of the age. Okay? So the last thing I want us to talk about is, what does Jesus mean when he says the end of the age? And then this was actually, I was working on this a few weeks ago. I had not looked ahead at the readings. And so when I actually read the readings first thing this morning, I went, thank you, Lord. This is just perfect. He's already cleared the way for us to talk about this today. Number 7, parable of the net. So definitely there is a separation that is taking place today. The end of the age is marked by a separation, definitely, a sorting. Remember, in the parable of the tares and the wheat, the separation is put off until the end of the growing season, right? The end of the season, then that separation takes place. In the parable of the net, the separation is also put off until the harvest of fish is gathered in, until everything is brought to shore is when the separation takes place. So in a commentary, oops, isn't that a pleasant picture? In a commentary, I tried to get the most dramatic one I could find. Flames everywhere. St. John Chrysostom, we hear this. And this parable, he interprets without so much as being asked. Now, do you remember that in a couple of the others, the disciples went back to Jesus and said, "What did you mean by that?" And he interpreted it for them. So this is what Chrysostom is referring to. He says, and this parable, he interprets without so much as being asked. He speaks from his own clarity of voice. He explained that the bad will be cast away, and he gives us the punishment. He says they will be cast into a fiery furnace. In these parables, we see how many ways our Lord has told us the ways of destruction. Isn't this an interesting view? Has told us the ways of destruction. By the rocky ground, by the thorns, by the wayside, by the chairs. Now, he says, by the net. It is completely consistent with his teaching. He tells us that broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many there will be who go that way. So Chrysostom, like some of the other fathers, and I went, I like to do that. I like to go and look and see what they said, because they all wrote commentaries on Matthew, especially, and I was interested to know what the fathers say about this. And again, it's that same kind of purview we've talked about in here before, that they are so focused on the church in its first few centuries and separating the heretical from the orthodox, that they tend to take the purview of this negative, and I don't mean negative, we all know there's going to be a destruction, but they tend to take this purview that Jesus is talking about the church. And he is, of course, but they think it's in their age. And so Chrysostom goes on to write about all the heretics that are going to burn like this. Okay? And that's useful. I mean, it's helpful. Origen of Alexandria actually tells us that the parable emphasizes our free will. So he wrote a treatise on free will, that it is our choice whether you end up in the bucket with the good fish or you're thrown away with the wicked ones and end up here. It's our choice. The kingdom of heaven is like a net. Now, y'all know that I'm really interested in this, right? Why am I interested in this? Because when Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like, and then he gives us a word. How many times have we unpacked this before? The kingdom of heaven is like leaven. And we've had to talk about leaven. Y'all probably learned more about growing wheat than you ever wanted to know when we talked about the parable of the tares and the wheat. So this is another one that is intriguing because of the way Jesus expresses this. He says again, because he's trying to make sure everybody gets the point. This is the 7th time. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net. A net. So remember the context, like the historical context of this. Jesus is speaking to people who live a very simple life. They're farm workers, they're agricultural, or they're fishermen, or they're both. So it's no surprise that these parables take the form that they do. Now we've seen the agricultural parables, the tares and the wheat, the sower, the parable of the sower. We looked at, we didn't, I wasn't here, but Deacon John talked about the parable of the mustard seed. So now we're hearing one that has to do with the sea. Field workers and fishermen understood these parables more easily and readily than we do. So I think we have to kind of take a little bit of a dive into this. The kingdom of heaven is like a net. Can we stop right there? Because I am interested in the net. Jesus just made it the equivalent of the kingdom of heaven. So the net. What would Jesus mean by the kingdom of heaven is like a net? What is a net, by the way? What's a net? Okay, an instrument to catch fish. I mean, that's certainly how these people would have understood it. Something to gather. You're gathering things together. Yeah, that's the purpose of a net, is to gather something. But to gather it in a way that it's not going to get away from you, right? You're gathering it together. How are nets made, by the way, that are cast into the sea? Anybody ever done this? Okay. Anything special about that net? Say, as opposed to like a butterfly net? It's weighted. It's weighted. I mean, remember, please remember this, and I feel like I have to emphasize this again. All of these things have universal meaning. This is a parable of truth that Jesus speaks. There is a beautiful harmony between what he knows the lives of these people are and the understanding of the kingdom of heaven. God is speaking to us as the creator of all, the organizer of all. He's going to be the one that supervises the harvest. And he is speaking a truth here that is so important. And Ryan just said it. The net is weighted. So if you're going to go and catch something like the true story, I was at a play a few weeks ago that my son was in, and a bat got in the theater. And which was not a big deal until it got on the stage. And I watched as they kind of stopped the show to get the stagehands out to catch this bat with a net. So what is the difference between something like that and what we're talking about here? This net is weighted. The drag net was a very common tool. Everyone knew what this was. It was used in the Sea of Galilee where Jesus lived and taught. It's the primary means of fishing. It's the way they fished was with a drag net, or a draw net as it's sometimes called. It's a large net that's weighted down so that it will drop all the way to the bottom. It'll drop all the way to the bottom of the sea. And it's dragged along the bottom. It's what's called a drag net. It's dragged behind the boat, or beside the boat, along the bottom of the sea, catching all kinds of fish. Are y'all getting the picture? So the fishermen would then sort the fish. They'd haul the drag net on board the boat, sort the fish, decide which ones could be kept and sold at market, and which ones needed to be thrown away or thrown back in that case. The parable of the net draws on this specific cultural background that these people knew to convey the message about the kingdom of heaven. A net, as Father said, a net gathers together. A net gathers in. It takes in all kinds of fish, doesn't it? Big fish, little fish, red fish, blue fish. Did I get that right, Dr. Seuss? Did I get that right? Is it red fish, blue fish? One fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish. Okay, there you go. Well, I did big fish, little fish, red fish, blue fish. But it's all fish, and I think that's what's important. The net represents this gathering with the promise of the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is like a net. A net. Therefore, it seeks to gather. This is what the kingdom seeks to do, is to gather in. This is completely consistent with what you've seen with the theme we've talked about of God seeing promise and possibility. Yeah? Now we could use this entire time that we have together this morning to focus on, for instance, the themes of the fathers, to look at St. John Chrysostom and to talk about the fires of hell. We could do that. But I would prefer to talk about the promise and the possibility that God sees. And to me, that's been the most prominent theme of all of these, is that think about the chairs we talked about. Might the tares become more like the wheat if they grow alongside the wheat? Is it possible that the tare could be influenced by the wheat? They're allowed to grow together for a season. I mean, yes, meanwhile, the tares are sucking all the nutrients out of the soil that the wheat needs. But think about what that means even. Remember that the wheat must then become stronger wheat. The wheat has to sink deeper roots. The wheat has to reach higher to the sun. It makes the wheat stronger. But might the tare not also be influenced by the wheat? I think that was a question we asked in that parable. Might the seed cast upon the rocks and thorns unimaginably take root and grow? It happens. People, it happens. This is maybe not a probability, but it is a possibility that it would happen. So, the kingdom of heaven is like a net. God sees possibility and promise in this casting the net into the sea, dropping it all the way to the bottom to pick up everything, wherever you are. If you're at the top of the waters or you are at the very bottom, the net is going to reach you. It's a gathering in. Nothing is going to be missed. Those fish at the very bottom of the sea have the exact same possibility as those at the top, and God sees no difference. God's love wants to miss no one. As a matter of fact, if you look in other places in sacred scripture, you see that Jesus even warns, doesn't he, that those who think they are closest to the kingdom of heaven, let's say the fish at the top of the water, those who think they are closest to the kingdom of heaven are actually sometimes the farthest away. And I think there's another sort of layer to this parable if we wanted to explore that. Like the seed scattered on the rocky soil, the net goes all the way down. By design, it is weighted to reach them all. And that's what God wants. So I'd like to focus on that. Can we focus on that? Out of love, when God created man, he gave us free will. That is true. Some will choose to opt out of this kingdom promise. But I cannot believe, and I'm not talking about universal salvation here, but I cannot believe that God wants this. But out of love, when he created us, love demands free will. It has to be a choice. So there will be people who will not choose to be in the kingdom. Does that make sense? So I want to look at it from that perspective. The parable warns that there's going to come a time when the net gathers us all in, we are going to be pulled up on the shore, and the good fish will be separated from bad. We're told that. But in the meantime, we have a choice. We have a choice. And more importantly, for the people sitting in this room, in the meantime, you have an opportunity to help someone else to hear this message. These parables are not meant for us to take them and hold them and keep them. And as much as I like to look at them and think about them and pray about them and share my pithy thoughts with other people, that's not what they're meant for. They're meant to be taken out there to the people who are in the net, right? To the other fish, red fish, blue fish, the other ones in the net. So we think about this too. The kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown into the sea. That's a very passive phrase, wouldn't you say? That's passive voice. The kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown into the sea. That's poor grammar. That's poor grammar. In English, anyway. Does the net throw itself into the sea? What is the subject doing the acting here? The kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown into the sea. What's the subject? Who's doing the acting? We are not told. So who's casting the net? All right? So put yourself in the first century on the Sea of Galilee as a fisherman, as much as you can imagine about that. cast the net? The fishermen, right, the fishermen. The fishermen cast nets into the sea. And again, remember here the structure, I keep going back to this, is that Jesus is saying the kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown into the sea. So he's talking about the net, isn't he? The net seems to be the central feature of this. Yes, it's thrown into the sea, but it's the net where he makes the equivalency. So who is casting the net? What has Jesus already done? He's called his disciples. He's walked along the shore of the Sea of Galilee. And when he calls the first two, remember? And what does he say to them? Leave your nets and I will make you fishers of men. Okay, so think about this. What Jesus is saying here, the kingdom of heaven is like a net cast into the sea. He could have been standing there looking at his disciples. You are the fishermen. You are the ones who are going to cast this net into the sea. The net is cast by the disciples. We have to, and that means all of us, by the way.
Why didn't he just say men and not all?
Well, I think that's very specific. I think it's very specific. He's talking to the first century hearer. It's a cultural context, okay? I will make you fishers of men. Yes, today, academia would have me say fishers of humanity. But that's only if you identify as human, so. Sorry, just a little sidebar commentary. Sorry about that. The net is cast by the disciples of the ancient age and of our time too. It is the gospel. It is the church itself. The kingdom of heaven is like a gathering in of all, with promise for all. Now, one of the questions that might come to mind, I think, and I have this question, how long do we have to be together in this net? Do you like all the fish in the net? They're different species. They look different from you. Some are big, some are little, some are different colors, right? Some have nasty habits, maybe. Those ones at the bottom feeders. You know, what association should they have with the more elegant fish that float near the top? The prime fish, maybe. So I think that's a fair question. I mean, I had this question when I was looking at this. I was like, oh, Lord, how long? How long do I have to be in this net with these other people? But might it not be long enough for the good fish to influence the bad fish? Y'all thinking about that? Or you're like, what's her point? So think about, remember we talked about that the tares and the wheat are allowed to grow together for a season. And we really explored what might be the meaning behind why would Jesus even allow that? Why would he do that? Why would he allow the tares to grow alongside the wheat, even for a season? Well, why do the fish all have to be in the net together until they're all hauled on board the boat? Because remember this drag net process, this draw net, you drop the net and then and sometimes you go a great distance before you pull that net in. So all along the way you're collecting fish and drawing them in. Might the net not be just an allegory of the church in the world? If so, and this is the important part for all of us to hear this morning, because you are the church. We are the church. If the drag net is the church in the world, then we better be sure that our drag net is weighted. We need to be sure that it goes to the bottom, it goes to the edges, it goes to the periphery, it goes to the fringes, as our Holy Father has said over and over again. Are you going to the fringes? Are you going to the edges? Are you going to the bottom? Right? Miss no one. So, we explored the question again, here again and again and again, the promise and the possibility, the promise and the possibility. God really can't see anything else. We see limitation. He sees possibility and promise. Consider, might we not be in the net for the entirety of the season of our lives? It's not going to be a couple of hours on the Sea of Galilee, but maybe it's the season of our whole lives. We are gathered together with potential to impact one another for the good. And that's what I think. I think the parable highlights the nature of the kingdom of heaven as a place where people of all kinds are gathered. All of God's people are gathered, just as the dragnet catches fish of every kind. So too, the kingdom of heaven is open to everyone, regardless of their background, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their social status, regardless of what kind of life they have lived before they're caught in the net. This parable emphasizes that the kingdom of heaven is not exclusive to a particular group of people. Now, that's an interesting way to think about it because, as I said, God sees possibility and God sees promise, and we believe that His will that all be saved. Not that we will all be saved. Please hear me say this. I am not a universalist, so don't repeat that. I'm not saying that. I am saying it is His will that all would be saved. Except for, what is this little thing He gave us? Free will. And it's free will that allows us to love. So we have to have it. He does wish it. The kingdom of heaven, the net that gathers us together, it's promise. So when it is full, they haul it ashore. That was kind of the second phrase I wanted to look at. When it is full, they haul it ashore. Who is they? They. Well, there's a few ways to look at this, isn't there? They is a plurality of persons, isn't it? It's more than one. In the second part of the parable, it might seem that the they represents the angels because they're the ones that are going to be doing the sorting, yes? So they haul it ashore. Note that Jesus does not say the kingdom of heaven is the separation of the good from the wicked, does He? That's not what He says. The kingdom of heaven is the net, the gathering place, the net that catches everything together. Until we reach the shore, we are all living in that same opportunity to be the good fish. The net reaches shore because they pull it in. Think about that. They. I want to know, who are they? The fishermen, the disciples, the church. It's not clear, is it? Because if you really explore this the way we've already talked about it, then if the net is the church, who are they? We don't decide when the net gets pulled in. We don't decide that. We don't decide when the end of the age, put a pin in that, we're coming back to the end of the age. We don't decide when that is. So who are they? It's more than one. Just sheer size of the net and the fullness of the net means it has to be more than one. Anyway, I think that's an interesting, I don't have an answer to that question, by the way. I posed that rhetorically. I hope that one of you would. That's an epic fail. Thank you very much. But no, I mean, I think it's something that to really, and nothing He says is by accident. So it means something. But when they pull all the fish ashore, then our time for choosing to be the good fish is at an end. It's over. It is interesting that our gospel reading today is also from Matthew. If you've been to 8 o'clock Mass, you know this. The reading is from Matthew, when Jesus predicts to his disciples the second coming. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. And he will send out his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the end of the earth to the end of the sky. So there's kind of a recurrent theme, isn't there? Especially the whole gathering part. The whole gathering part. He will send out his angels and they will gather. So it occurs to me that maybe the they here is the angels. There is a reckoning in our future. And when you think about the angels that reap the harvest in the parable of the tares and the wheat, it's the same theme. It's the angels who reap that harvest that are here again in another parable. They're the same angels that separate those who are going to be cast into the fiery furnace. And why would this be the angels? Men can't do this. Not even the earthly church. So, God tasked the angels to do this, to reap the harvest. Historically, there have been a lot of very differing, I told you I looked at this a lot of really challenging interpretations that are worth just asking ourselves a couple of questions. For some reason, this one, we talked about this with the parable of the leaven. I think we talked about the fact that if you go back and you read through church history and you look at how this parable has been used as for teaching, for catechesis, there's a couple of challenging interpretations that come out that I think are interesting. One challenge has been a seemingly disagreement about identifying the significance of the sorting process. Now, bear with me for a minute. The significance of the sorting process. Some argue that the sorting represents the final judgment. The final judgment where the good and the bad are separated, right? Not your particular judgment. Everybody know the difference? There is a particular judgment for you, and then there is a final judgment. This is church teaching. It's catechism. I can get you the paragraph if I need to. But there is this particular judgment, and then there's the general judgment. And so there's been some disagreement about whether this is, the sorting process that's described here is actually the final judgment, where the good and bad are separated forever, while others see it as referring to your particular judgment. Others see it as referring to the present age, when the church must distinguish between heresy and orthodoxy, between the truth and false believers. So there's been all sorts of interpretations of this parable. Could it be all of those? Absolutely. Absolutely. It could be all of those. Finally, there's also a question about the meaning of the furnace, where the bad fish are thrown, is also debated. Some early fathers interpreted that to mean, as Chrysostom did, this is literally the fires of hell. Okay, and that's what the fiery furnace is. Interestingly, others, like Augustine, sees this as referring to temporal judgment. Others still see it in very historical terms, that he's talking about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD. Could it be all of those things? Yes. Yes. I mean, think about it. The destruction of the temple in Jerusalem is a metaphor for a lot of things. For man himself, for man's relationship with God, for the new covenant. I mean, there's all sorts of metaphors we can draw from that. But clearly, when we look to Jesus' words, we have to consider that in each parable, he wants to tell us what the kingdom of heaven is like. The sower. The kingdom of heaven is like the sower. The kingdom of heaven is like the leaven. The kingdom of heaven is like the mustard seed. The kingdom of heaven is like the net. He's telling us what it's like. What do all these things have in common that I just mentioned? What do all these things have in common? The sower, the leaven, the mustard seed, the net. What do they have in common? This is a test. They're like heaven. Okay, like the kingdom of heaven. So besides the fact that Jesus uses them all to tell us that they are like the kingdom of heaven, that's right. It's like a sower, it's like the leaven, the mustard seed, the net. They have to all be alike. There's something about them that is all the same. So I got to thinking about that, right? From the mouth of God himself, he's telling us the kingdom of heaven is like all of these things. He's not giving us things that are that have some dissonance to them, or that wouldn't be in harmony, that there's not some universal theme that connects them all together. That's not the language of God. So what do they all have in common? It's up to us to discern what he's telling us they mean. I hate to keep using these words, but maybe you're going to catch the theme. Promise and possibility. That's what they have in common. Promise and possibility. The kingdom of heaven is like a sower. The kingdom of heaven is not like the seed that gets tossed on rocky soil or the seed gets tossed into the thorns. The kingdom of heaven is like the sower who doesn't see those things, who simply casts the seed. Yeah? Y'all with me? So this is what they have in common. The sower scatters seed without any expectation, and only hope that it's going to grow somewhere. The leaven multiplies what is. In that beautiful arithmetic, yeah? It multiplies what is. There is abundance. The mustard seed is tiny, 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 but yet it yields this huge bush that provides shade and a home for creatures. The net gathers in all, even reaching to the bottom of the depths of the water for all fish. That, people, I think, is the essence of what we're talking about here, is God's unconditional love, possibility, promise, abundance, the gift of life. Okay, so now we get to this. And I want to look at this final highlighted phrase. I'm looking to see if I have enough time. I know this is where I can go off on a tangent. So, thus it will be at the end of the age. The age. What is the age that Jesus is referring to? The establishment of the church that we see in Acts 2 with Pentecost. That's when the age begins. The establishment of the church. And then it ends at the end of the age. Okay, so the age we're talking about is the church on earth.
When Jesus comes back again.
The end of the age. Yes, put pin in that. I'm coming back to that. When Jesus comes back again. During this time of the age that he's talking about, it is the disciples who are gathering souls, represented in all the parables we've heard about, but today we're talking about the metaphor fish from all over the world. At the end of this age, the angels will come and separate the wicked from the righteous, just like we read about in the tares and the wheat. This task is assigned to the angels, remember, and not the church. It's a supernatural conclusion. The end of the age is a supernatural conclusion. Only God can bring an end to the age. Y'all with me so far? For Catholics, this means Jesus' second coming. The second advent. This prevision today, today's gospel reading that I just highlighted, the first 2 weeks of Advent, we're going to be hearing a lot about the second coming. Not the first coming, but we're going to be hearing about the second coming in our readings in the first couple of weeks of Advent. The time is going to come when the harvest is ripe, the fish have been gathered in, but again consider this is not until the tares have grown alongside the wheat for a season, not until the sower has seen what's going to be reaped from the scattered seed, not until the gospel has been multiplied in leaven, not until, in other words, not until the gospel has been preached to the entire world. Yeah? Even to the depths and far reaches of the sea. So in the end of the age, what the end of the age does not mean for Catholics is some kind of rapture event. I am going to be as gentle as I can. But if I see one more of you post something on social media about the rapture, I'm coming for you personally. we're going to have, I'm going to ask you to coffee, and we're going to have an instructional one-on-one session about what the church teaches about the end times. Stop spreading 20th and 21st century garbage. Well, that wasn't gentle, was it? That didn't really sound very gentle, and it came out of my mouth. That wasn't very charitable. I hope St. Augustine didn't listen to me this morning. In all things charity. Okay, well, maybe that didn't come out right. Maybe I need a more gentle correction, but this is the thing. So, probably. So, but really, seriously, please stop. Please stop. This is not historical, theological teaching or understanding of the church. It's not. It's not. And as I said, I look on social media and I think, God, did they sleep through PSR or CCD or confirmation or, yeah. So this is a teachable moment. Please go to the Cathedral YouTube page and find my talk on last things. Please. Seriously. I did an entire adult faith formation on this, talking about the end times, talking about what the church teaches about the end times. And so it's on the Cathedral YouTube page. I'll give you all an A if you'll do that. The church tells you what it teaches. And this is, our liturgy, this morning, I'm thinking about it during Mass, our liturgy tells us what the church teaches about this. If we're really paying attention or really even thinking about it a little bit, if you think about like the memorial acclamations, the mystery of faith that we proclaim, yeah? The mystery of faith that we proclaim together every Mass, which takes one of a few forms, but you all recognize it. When we eat this bread and drink this cup, we proclaim your death, O Lord, until you come again. The end. That's it. That's what it says. That's the mystery of our faith. That particular prayer has been prayed since before Pope St. Gregory the Great compiled this into the Gregorian Sacramentary in the late 5th century. So we've been praying, we've been using that a very long time. The church teaches Christ will come again. There you go. That's what we believe. Christ will come again. A second coming. A second coming. When is his first coming? The little manger in Bethlehem. Yes, that's the first advent. The second advent will be his return. And if you don't believe me, if you want to go look, the definitive Catholic teaching on this is contained in the Catechism and is under the discussion of the Articles of Faith, the Article of the Creed. From thence he will come again to judge the living and the dead. That's where there's an expanded exploration of church teaching on what we call eschatology, or the end, okay? What the church teaches. This is important. The creed is infallible. Do you all believe that? The creed is infallible. And incidentally, stop right here just for a second. Incidentally, does everybody know that next year, 2025, marks the 1700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea? Isn't that cool? 2025, I won't be here for the 1800th. I won't be here for a significant centennial after this one, so we're going to be looking at, actually, I'm hoping we can look at sort of some proceedings of the council. Some of it's quite humorous, by the way. We have some excellent sources about what went on every day and what the emperor was wearing and who he was talking to and what he ate for lunch. All of this is really fascinating stuff. But anyway, the creed, my point about the creed, our Nicene Creed is an infallible document. So when you profess it, it's the truth, right? The second coming is associated with the end of the world and therefore the last judgment. We know that. Therefore, it is not associated with any earlier time, such as that Christ is coming to establish a millennium. Have y'all heard that? The Catholic Church specifically condemns millenarianism, and I can't even say it, millenarianism. The church specifically condemns that teaching. According to that teaching, which is false and is of 19th century origin, nobody talked about it before the 19th century. According to that false teaching, Jesus is going to establish a throne in this world and reign here for 1,000 years. And then he will rapture some of you. Well, me too, if we're going to count. But instead, the church teaches that Jesus already reigns in eternity. Already reigns in eternity. And that in this world, his reign, established as the seed, is found in the church. His reign here is in the church and through the church. This is the 1,000 years. And 1,000 years is not literal. Nobody ever read it that way until, again, the 19th century. The 1,000 years is a Hebrew way of saying an indefinite long time, a time we don't know when it's coming to an end. 1,000 years. It's not a literal 1,000 years. So in this case, the time between the first and second comings, the era of the church. In other words, the last days in the broadest sense. So the book of Revelation situates this particular era between the persecutions of what we would call the Roman Antichrist of the first century and the final unleashing of evil at the end of the age. And naturally, as you might imagine, non-Catholics cannot accept that the Catholic Church represents Christ in this world. As I've just said it, right? That the reign is in eternity and the seed of that reign on earth is in the church. Okay? Y'all with me? This is what the church teaches. So naturally, a non-Catholic might have difficulty, like after the Enlightenment, when we know better, might have difficulty thinking that the Catholic Church represents Christ on earth. So they are forced to look for a personal, earthly reign somewhere out in the future. So the notion that Jesus is going to come to rapture some of us and then depart so that the devil can trick the world again. Did y'all hear what I just said? Did y'all hear what I just said? You were paying attention, Chris? The notion that Jesus is going to rapture some of us and then depart, and so that the devil can trick the world again. I just want y'all to really think about that.
That sounds ridiculous.
It's also 3 Advents. That's the problem. I mean, if you don't find anything theologically difficult about that, I'll pray for you. But if you don't find anything theologically difficult about that, about Jesus returning to get some of us and then leaving the rest of them to like figure it out because the devil's going to torture them for however long, please remember that that's 3 Advents. 3 Advents, 3 comings. And that is absolute. In other words, he's born in Bethlehem. He comes back, he returns to rapture, and then he returns for the final judgment. That's 3 Advents. So in other words, this is completely incompatible with the incomprehensible dignity of our Lord, number one, and his love for his people. That's what's theologically wrong with it. Jesus' coming is going to be definitive, triumphant, and everlasting, not temporal and limited. And as for the rapture, a lot of people will say, well, look at 1 Thessalonians, right? This chapter 4. And I didn't write the reference down, so here I go. It's chapter 4. It's somewhere in the middle of chapter 4 where this word rapture is used. And the meaning of that, the way the church has traditionally interpreted that, is that at the return of Christ and the general resurrection of the dead, the persecution of the Antichrist will have no advantage in being resurrected over those who died before his coming. In other words, everyone will be caught up together. Those that have gone before us and those that are still here. We will all go to meet him at the same time and be with him forever. So if you're interested in that, the catechism, I did write down the paragraphs of the catechism, interestingly. Not the scripture, but I wrote down the catechism passage. The general order of events near the end, at the end of the world, the end of the age, is found in the catechism, paragraph 673 to 677. And interestingly, chronologically, it sort of looks at these are the things that are associated with the end of the age. And interestingly, it includes the preaching of the Gospels to all peoples of the world and the four corners of the earth. You know, kind of like casting a net into the sea. Okay. I was in the right chapter? Okay, good. This makes me nervous. Like casting a net into the sea. What are your thoughts, comments, observations, questions? I'll take anything but criticism. Mm-hmm. I'm listening. I'm going to walk and get some. I was going to get some coffee, but there's not any coffee. Never mind. Okay.
The fisherman is casting the net. So, it seems to me that there's a correspondence between this and the sower.
Yes.
And Jesus identifies the sower as himself, the Son of Man. Okay, so the fisherman being God, or the Son of God, this great effort at salvation,
Right.
casting the possibilities of the gospel, throwing, almost like throwing away. The sower throws away the seed. All right, so God, Jesus, throws away, and not to destruction, of course, but the fullness of his giving of his love and his overture to all humanity, to all creation. Okay, so the net, is comprehensive. God is throwing away his love to be able to catch, to be gathered. And the net itself, while it encompasses all these fish, different kinds, there's also the constrictive aspect of the net. Okay, so the fish now are constricted to be closer to each other.
Right.
We need that.
Thank you. Oh, my. True friend. Thank you. I'm listening, Father.
We need that because it's so easy for us to stand off to some other people.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Red fish, blue fish.
We need the constrictive influence of the net to bring us together so we can talk, so we can share, so we can influence as we are being gathered in.
That's beautiful. I also like the fact that you drew the correlation to the sower. But just as the sower casts seeds indiscriminately, so does the fisherman cast the net, not knowing where the fish are. Yeah.
Thought about the net too.
Yes.
The driving net has to be repaired after every use.
Like reforming the church. Yeah.
I thought that, and then
That's
I
a
thought,
good
well,
one.
if you don't know what you're doing, you could also make it worse, right? So it kind of works both ways too.
Right.
If you make the holes too big, fish can escape.
Interesting.
So, yeah, because it gets caught on rocks, it tears, the fish are spiky or whatever. So you lose weights along the way.
Uh-huh.
So it has to be repaired every time, I think.
Has to be repaired.
It's the need for ongoing reunification.
Yeah. Oh, I like that too. Okay, now I have something new to think
Hopefully
about.
it's not heretical.
No, I'm sure it's not. I mean, I think that whenever we're talking about, that it's, well, anyway, I won't go off on that tangent, but,
That's about like saying that the church is not perfect.
right, the church is not perfect. Right. And that's kind of where y'all had actually jumped ahead of me. That's exactly where my mind was going when you said that. Is that, yeah, if you're not careful, you can make it worse. But ultimately, the fisherman knows what to do. Right? The fisherman will know what to do. The fisherman will know how to repair the net. The fisherman will know why he's losing fish. Right? Yeah.
The kingdom of God would be where God's will is being done, correct?
The kingdom of heaven. Yeah, the kingdom of heaven.
So the kingdom of heaven could also be on earth
Sure,
if God's will is being done.
sure.
And it's not always a separate heaven,
No,
So, and it's where God's love is being
it,
accepted.
it's where the kingdom of heaven is like a net. No, the kingdom of heaven, as I said, Jesus uses this term 31 times in the New Testament, and in no place does he specifically say that it is somewhere else.
And so, and what I liked about the readings today with Daniel,
Mm-hmm.
about the fire and everything, and you brought up the fire, is that God gives his love, as you mentioned, to everyone. He pours his love out on everyone. We have to accept it or not. And so the fire at the end can be those who turn their back on God, don't accept his love, so the fire burns them.
Right,
Whereas those burnished in fire accepted God's love, so it's like a
right.
fire.
A cleansing. It's a cleansing.
So
Yeah.
those readings were so cool.
Which is really similar, you know, if in your spare time, you can go and read, for instance, St. Augustine has a commentary that sort of forms the foundation for purgatory, okay? And he writes about, and I don't know if it's this passage or another one in Daniel, where he writes about the fire that way, that it is this purgation. It can be a purgation or it can be a punishment. Right, so that's interesting that you said that. I just remembered that. What else, guys? Any other thoughts? Yes, David.
I don't know if this is intended. I was thinking about what it's like to be caught.
Caught in a net?
And I imagine for a fish, it is not a comfortable experience. It's like I have my habitat, I'm used to the things that I'm used to, and suddenly I'm thrown into this thing with everybody else,
With these other fish.
some of whom are my enemies for eating me for my whole life. And then we're hauled out of our environment onto the shore. And when you were reading and you were starting to talk about what is a net, and you were like, okay, where else in the Bible am I running into people weaving things? I was reminded of Christ weaving the whip of cords and then going into the temple and taking over the money tables. And so I don't know if that's intended, but it was an interesting parallel between like here's what the kingdom of heaven in its uncomfortable reality could look like. It's like here's people thrown together in a messy situation, all impacting each other, and it doesn't look like the homies sitting around a table singing Kumbaya. It's like no, this looks like the Son of Man whipping somebody else and disrupting their way of life.
It looks like conflict sometimes. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I got something else to go think about. Huh? We got one more. Okay.
I think of the net as something great, like companies that offer equal opportunity,
Yeah.
and it's only made to work with their company. I think of the net as the equal opportunity for everyone in this world to be caught, but have a choice whether to take that opportunity or not.
Right. Sure. It's all about our choice. Yeah. Okay. A few little announcements, a few little housekeeping things. We do not meet next Sunday, the 24th. We will be meeting on December the 1st, which is the Sunday after Thanksgiving. Father Rainey will be with you doing the parable of the prodigal son. Okay? I had falsely ascribed him to teach today. And that was my fault. As you can tell, I was scheduled to teach today, so here I am. The couple other things I want to tell you real quick is that coming up on December 5th, we have we're doing a Thursday night, First Thursday's Faith Formation series, and we're just trying it to kind of see how it goes, what people want. But the first Thursday in December is December the 5th. And so it is going to be me and Father Rainey and Greg LaRue who are going to be talking about the church is getting ready to enter a Jubilee year. It officially begins on December 24th. Pope Francis has called it a Pilgrims of Hope, so the theme will be hope throughout the year. And I personally, for one, am very excited about this. It's a really beautiful opportunity in the life of the church to dig into the church. And so we're going to be having a parish potluck dinner that night. You can look, is it on the website, Greg? Do you know? Look on the website. It's also on social media that whatever your last name begins with, that's what you bring. So this should be interesting. I hope not everybody, the only people who come here begin with the letter A. But hopefully we'll have some diversity, like those fish in the net. That's going to be a wonderful evening together, and we'll be talking about, I'm going to be doing a little bit of the historical, that's a big surprise, talk about why the church has a Jubilee year, looking back to the year 1300 when Pope Boniface VIII called the very first one, and why he did, and why we do it every 25 years, except when there's a extraordinary one, like we had the Extraordinary Year of Mercy in 2015. Y'all might remember that. We had a holy door here, yeah? So this time there will only be 5 holy doors. There'll be 4, the 4 basilicas in Rome, and a prison in Rome. We'll have a holy door. 5:30. Thank you. I wasn't sure. 5:30. Okay, so the other thing I want to tell you is that we have an Advent mission coming up on Sunday the 15th and Monday the 16th of December, where our speaker is Andy Otto, who has a website called God in All Things, a very much proponent and advocate and teacher of Ignatian spirituality. He will be our speaker, and he also, the topic is going to be the hidden figures of Advent. Who are the people that come to mind immediately when you think of Advent in sacred scripture? And who are the people maybe you don't think about? So looking at the hidden figures of Advent, I think it's going to be a really wonderful 2 days. And then finally, I want to tell you that, a reminder that that some of us are reading a book together for Advent called, I can't remember the exact name of it, Angels, Our Guardians in Spiritual Battle. And if that interests you, I've sent out a couple of flock notes about it. You can contact me about it. I can give you the link to the book if you need that again. And we're going to meet here on Tuesday, December 10th to talk about that at 5:30. So, am I missing anything? Greg, am I forgetting anything?
Did you say you have extra books for that book club?
Do what?
Did you say you have extra books?
Yes, I do. No, there will be some at the front desk, probably by the end of the week. Yeah, I don't have them today. What else? I'm sorry. December 12th, sacred music. Okay. The 12th and the 17th, and what time is that? 5:30 again. 5:30 to 6. Okay. In the parish hall. In the parish hall.
I'm not going to be able to attend that book club, but I could go
Sure, you can read the book. Absolutely.
on the plane.
All right. Well, thank you guys, and I will see you in 2 weeks.